You know that feeling, right? You just pour weeks, maybe even months into building this awesome full stack app. The code is clean. The features are nice, slick, and it runs perfectly on your local machine. And you're ready to share it to the world. And then all of a sudden, reality hits. And the part that you've been putting off, deployment, is taking full effect. Suddenly you're drowning in the sea of cloud consoles, confusing administrative role configurations and VPNs and VPSs and dozens of services that all sound the same. Trying to connect a separate front end, back end, and database can feel like a full-time job. It's a total nightmare. Enough mismatched config files, missing environment variables, and cryptic error messages that lead you down a 10-year-old Stack Overflow rabbit hole. And boy, those were the days. But what if I told you that there's a platform that makes all of that point and all of that pain disappear? A platform that takes you from a finished project to a live global application with just a few clicks. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I use Railway to deploy my full stack project, specifically a Next.js and Supabase app from start to finish. Now, before we get into the how, I want to talk about for a minute the why. I didn't just stumble upon Railway one day. Like a lot of you, I started with the old school hosting providers. Actually, about a year ago, if you check my channel, I probably have a card on the left or right up here in one of these videos. You'll see that I made a video about how to automate your GitHub automation using Hostinger, trying to set up CI/CD. And so, I wrestle with different VPSs and trying to configure different Nginx and running to different, forgetting security updates and things of that nature. Excuse me. Don't get me wrong, it was cheap, but it was also a huge time sink and super fragile. So, one bad command and everything would just fall over. So what I ended up doing, I tried some of the big cloud platforms. So I spent a little time, dealing with like AWS documentation or trying to figure out like EC2 instances and Fargate, ECS and things of that nature. Don't get me wrong, these are incredibly powerful platforms, but the complexity for the projects that I were building at this time is just not what's needed. It's overwhelming, And so I spent more time being like a system admin than a developer, which was the opposite of what I wanted. So, and then, you got platforms like Vercel, which are amazing for Next.js, especially with the front end, specifically because they're the ones that developing it or whatever. But what about the rest of the app? You still have databases, you still have a back end service to run and things of that nature. And so it's like, well, what do you do in that instance? And that is the part where basically, trying to figure out how do you put all these different services together, having its own bill, how you handle all these different environmental variables, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was messy. And so what I ended up doing, I just wanted one single place where I could see my entire app from Next.js to the database all on one dashboard. Now, don't get me wrong, I did use my dashboard inside of Railway. However, because I'm using Supabase, I just am allowing Supabase to manage that at this time, authentication, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, long story short, in one git push, I can deploy everything, and that's where I'm at. And so that's how I found Railway. The promise was simple: bring your code and we'll handle everything else. It's a modern cloud platform made for developers who want to ship apps, not become DevOps experts. Now, to be clear, Railway isn't completely free. It works on a user-based model. And new users do get a one-time grant of like $5 to create it, starting or whatever. But even if we check my Railway dashboard, I can almost tell you that like just my project usage, like I'm using $1 on my project currently. Like my estimated is $2. It's $20 a month minimum spend. So you definitely have space to work on your projects. Excuse me. So anyway, now that we got that out of the way, that's all the theory. So now let's get our actual hands dirty. And I want to really show you some of the things that, or how powerful Railway is. So we're going to deploy a real full stack application. Now this application that you see here is one that I recently deployed. I'm working on a few of my bugs and kinks, but that's not what we're working on. So let me get that off my screen. I built just a quick goal tracker for this particular project. It's a simple application. I apologize about that. Allergies acting up a little bit. But anyway, so we're going to deploy a simple application. It's fairly simple, but it does have all of the pieces of a modern web application. You'll be able to see I have it running locally here at a local host. And you'll also see that it is written in front end is Next.js style with Tailwind. And it's going to handle everything, all the UI, the routing, fetching the data, etc., etc. It's already done. I think I have this. I'll probably have a link in the description with a GitHub link to clone this if you want to, dabble around and play with it, because all of the instructions are within the repo itself as far as running the database setup, everything. But we'll go over that throughout this particular exhibition. Anyway, the backend is all powered by Supabase, which is an amazing open source alternative to Firebase. It gives us a Postgres database, authentication, and instant APIs all bundled together. In our app, Supabase takes care of user signups and login, and it stores all of our goal data in its database. The Next.js front end talks directly and securely to the Supabase API to manage everything. Now, we're not going to get into the actual code at this time, but if you take the time and look at like the package JSON, if you ever actually want to look at the code, there are like scripts that you have in there like dev, build, and start. And Railway uses these to build and run the application once it's deployed. So anyway, so we have a completely working app in the GitHub repo. So what I did earlier, this is that same repo that we were just looking at, the same project. And I went ahead and created this a couple hours ago. As you can see, it's 7:10. It's 3:26 in the morning. That's crazy. But a couple of hours I created this project, and everything would be within the README or the develop. The approach that I use as far as developing the structure. I try to make a lot of documentation because anybody who's following, I would want them to understand the project so that they'll understand how to structure their own projects in the future. Anyway, we've got README, and then we have a README with the actual tracking app itself, and it gives you the steps to install it, everything that's going to be needed, how to clone it, install the dependencies, set up your database, and this is key here because you're definitely going to have to set up these environmental variables and then how you run this server. And currently, like I said, we are currently running on the local host, but we're going to show you how this is deployed. Now we're going to show you that this works. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Now we see that this works, and I do have one goal that I set yesterday: deploy app to Railway. Now I'm going to show you that this is actually tied to my production database, which is not a good thing to do, but for testing purposes, I want to understand and get you to understand and show you how this works. So here we have a Supabase database where we'll have these project URL and API keys, and your keys are like a password. So you really don't want to expose this, but since this is just for tutorials, I really don't care. And so, but you have these two these two pieces of information that you will definitely need. And essentially, you'll go to supabase.com, sign in, or opt for an account. I'm pretty sure for what you're using it for, it'll be a free tier. And then you'll just create a project. Once you create that project, you'll go in, you'll create a new project, go in, goal tracker, boom, and you'll be able to see this information here. Now you can just leave that screen up because we'll get back to that in a moment. Now, where were we? So this is what we're going to do first. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, or the first thing that we should do, is head on over to Railway. I'll have a link in the description where you can sign up with my link, support the channel. But you'll essentially sign in with Railway. You go through the process of, obtaining your free credits if you have never signed up before. And then you'll set up a workspace. Once you set up that workspace, within that workspace, you'll hit this new button that allows you to create or add something to your project. And like I stated before, Railway allows you to deploy, you can deploy a PostgreSQL database instance within your Railway, because a lot of these things are containerized, or they're using Docker on the back end, I'm pretty sure. And so these are all containerized within this environment. And so it's definitely a beautiful thing. But here we're going to hit this deploy from GitHub repo, and then we're going to configure our GitHub app. We're going to find our repo with it. Now, I do want you to understand this tutorial is for those who have already completed their app and they're at the point of deployment. I didn't go into any of the coding to deploy, because it's a lot of that's taken care of today in today's time just with AI. So I'm getting into getting your applications that you have created and are production ready online. But anyway, so we're going to go here. Beck develops Gold Tracker. We're going to allow all repos, install and authorize. We're going to use a passkey. Oh, and since I don't even know if I have my passkey on my phone, but let's see. Since I got to tap this to log in. Yeah, I don't have a passkey here. I got to get it off my iPhone, and I don't even know where that's at. Let me go find it. Let me pause that. All right, let's try that again. We're going to deploy our repo, config that. Wait, what just happened? That's weird. Let's close that out. I think we timed out. But yeah, so we're going to hit a new deploy our repo. Oh, here we go. Got our Gold Tracker. All right, and it looks like it's automatically deploying. And we're going to see what happens when it builds this image. And that's it. That's it. But we're going to let it build. I'm going to stop the recording while it's doing that. All right, so anyway, let's get back to it. So the moment we selected the repo, Railway clones the code, starts analyzing it. This is one of the best things about Railway. It automatically sees that this is a Next.js app. It looks at the package.json and the Next.config files and knows exactly what to do. It doesn't ask a whole bunch of questions. It doesn't ask, do I need to do this or do I need to do that? Any of that. It just figures it out. So behind the scenes, it's using something called Nixpacks to create a lean production ready version of my application. Now it will automatically run npm install and next build for me, just like I would on my own machine. You can watch all of this happen in real time in the build logs. Now we're here in the build logs, and we also understand that we ran into an error and our deployment has failed. Now, prior to this, I ran into a build error that were linter errors, and those were not expected. So I fixed those off camera prior to coming back on. And the error that I was expecting was this Supabase URL, which is required. And now the reason that it's going to fail is because the API doesn't have the API keys it needs to connect to the database, and that's totally normal and expected. And so we're going to fix that right now. So remember earlier we talked about how we would have to go back into Supabase. So a full stack application is nothing without its environmental variables. Now these are like the secret keys and API endpoints that your code needs to function. Managing them safely is super important. And so now first we're going to grab our API keys from Supabase. And like I said, if you haven't created a Supabase account, you just go over to supabase.com. You log in. Here I'm already have an account. But yeah, you just log in. Here you go to the dashboard. And then you'll create, if you haven't created an organization, you'll create an organization. And then you have to create a new project. Now, once you're inside of that new project, you just click that project. And on that main dashboard screen, you're going to scroll down to the bottom and you'll see your project URL and your API keys. Now, these are the keys that we're going to need to place inside of our Railway application to get it to work. And so what we'll do at this time, we're going to go back over here to the variables, and we can actually go to the shared So shared variables are if you have multiple applications that share like environmental variables. Say if you have multiple services that share a database or something like that, you could create shared variables. But since we don't have an extensive project, we're just going to create these little variables here. And now our variable naming convention was located here within the README of the project. We were going to have to configure these two environmental variables. So we'll just copy this first one over, which is next public Supabase URL. And that's the name of it. So I'm going to copy that one. And we're going to give it that name. And the value, we're going to go back over to Supabase and the project URL. We're just going to copy that over and pop that baby right in. Add that. And now, boom, we've just added our first environmental variable. And we'll do the same thing for the next one. We'll make sure we grab the correct name because we know that our program is going to be looking for this name. And then that same value is going to come from your API key. Just copy that over. And like I said, I'm not too worried about these keys being exposed because I'm going to just delete this after this is over with, or re-roll those keys so that, you know, there'll be new keys in case I decide to keep the project up and running. But anyway, after we made these changes, as you can see, it automatically showed the changes that were happening. And so it does it on its own, but we can go ahead and apply those changes and deploy it. And now we're going to have us a new building out here. And we'll sit here and watch this, you know, build up for a few minutes and see what's going on. I'm actually going to pause this momentarily while it's building. All right, so we came back here. We came back to the computer 4 minutes ago. We wrapped up. I think it took about 2 or 3 minutes for the deployment to actually process. Let's see. Yeah, it took about a minute. Started at 3:47 and 3:48. Yeah, so not too long of a build process. And for us to test this, we can actually, give me a second. I think we're going now. We'll close out of this. We'll hit on this US East and it'll bring up these settings here. And we can, where is that? We can generate a domain. Just so that we can see our application running. We'll enter it on 8080. I think we listen on 8080. I don't know. Maybe we listen on 3000. I think we listen on 3000. But we'll just, yeah, we're gonna say 3000. And then we can hit that button. Yeah, let's click that button. And after a few minutes, because it's starting up, this is the first time it's ran, it's gonna take a few minutes. Oh, no, application failed. We gotta figure out what happened. Let's go back. All right, I made a small bug. When I was setting up in the settings, when I was setting up the domain, I put port 3000. It should have been port 8080, which is why I was receiving an error. But as you can see, our project is online currently, and we can actually sign in using our information that we made in our local host because it is attached to the same database. So we can sign in. We can see that now we deployed our app on Railway, so we can check that off. We can sign out. We can come back to it and sign in, and we can see that our status and everything updated. Now let's make a change. We want to change something just so we can see that these are changing. So we're going to say where it says my goals, we're going to change this to my future goals. So I'm going to pull that up in the code, and I don't even think I have the camera set up to where you all can see the code. So I'm just going to find that real quick in the code base. Log in, sign in, goals, go to that page. And I'm just going to make a change in the HTML. And then I'm going to make a commit and change it and show you the power of this. So I'm going to say my future goals. We're going to save that. Let's get status. We're going to add that, get add. We're going to commit that real quick. Get commit. And we're going to say quick change for test. Or for YouTube. And we're going to make that commit. I just committed it. We're going to go back over into Railway. And we're going to see that there's a new build automatically starting. Wait, it didn't automatically start just yet. Let's make sure did I push that? Oh no, I didn't push it. Get. That's funny. I gotta push it. Get push origin main. All right, now we're pushing that change, and we're gonna show you how Railway is automatically gonna start a new deployment with a new container that automatically registers those changes. You see that? And we're going to sit here and go through this build this time, and we can actually view the logs as it's building. You're going to see that it's going to basically run all of the starting commands. It's going to install the command line. It's going to run. It's going to build it first. Start it. It's going to make sure it's going to go through. So it's going to load in everything that it needs, all the modules. I knew it was running a Docker container. It's going to run everything in here. Copying up. This is all like a lot of Linux. So if you've never studied Linux, I have a video link here to start studying it somewhere in one of these cards above. But yeah, this is a lot of Linux. So you read what it's doing here in these different directories, et cetera, goes through the process of building out your static pages, your routes. Look at that, the static rendered, et cetera. Boom, complete. Now, when we go into the changes, we should see our new changes deployed. Oh, we gotta log in. So let's sign back in. And now we see our changes, my future goals. And that's the power of Railway. Literally, that's the magic, that's the beauty. Without me doing anything else, all I did was make a commit, push it to GitHub, and GitHub handled the rest. And so let's see here. All right, so I was checking my notes. So I think that was pretty much it. So let's recap. We took a full stack Next.js and Supabase app, hooked up our GitHub repo to Railway, plugged in our environmental variables here, and let Railway do all of the work. We got automatic builds, a live URL, and a full CI/CD pipeline in just a few minutes. And you can actually configure this URL to be a custom URL, as I did with my own application, Poker Journey. That's a custom URL ran, and it's running right now on Railway. And this is a lot more complex than that little simple app that I did there and showed. But yes, it's a lot going on here. If you're into poker and things of that nature, check it out. And let's see, did I cover everything? So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you've been struggling with the pain of deployment, I wouldn't recommend anything else beyond Railway. Like, I wouldn't recommend it enough. I started off doing my own hosting thing, and I love Railway. I'll probably never go back. It's just too easy. It's powerful enough to scale for real world applications. So if you did find this video helpful, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. That'll be awesome. It'll help us out, and I'll be bringing more content like this, and I'll probably get it a little bit better. I'm just getting back into making these videos. It's been a long time off. So I would like to thank you all for coming out. If you got any comments, drop them below. Tell me what you're working on, or if you got any questions about Railway. And do check out the description. I got a couple of good juicy apps down there. If you're into hosting, you're trying to do everything yourself like I used to, it's a link for that. But if you're trying to, be a little bit smart about your time, which you can't get back, and, utilizing your funds and money the way that you could to increase productivity, then I would definitely recommend Railway. But thank you.